The sensor board lit up without warning. No alarm, no buildup. One moment the display was clean, showing the usual scatter of dust and dead rock across the Cathara transit corridor. The next, there was a shape in the dark that had not been there before, or rather it had always been there. The sensors had simply not been close enough to see it. Crew officer Deneth stared at his screen for 3 full seconds before he said anything. In his 12 years of service aboard Council diplomatic vessels, he had learned not to report things he could not explain, but he also knew that sitting on something like this would end his career faster than a wrong answer. He cleared his throat. Commander Thesson, contact, bearing 274. Corridor center, no beacon, no IFF response, running dark. Commander Thesson crossed the bridge in 4 steps. He looked at the screen. He said nothing for a moment, which told Deneth everything about how serious this was. Thesson always had something to say. Size, Thesson asked. That is the part I am having trouble with, sir. The return was massive, not freighter massive, not station tender massive. The kind of massive that made Deneth want to recalibrate his equipment. Because surely something was wrong with the reading. Ambassador Vorek swept onto the bridge from the adjoining corridor, robes trailing, already irritated. He had been irritated since they left Council space, and he had not stopped being irritated since the boundary resolution he was being sent to deliver was, in his words, beneath his station. He had said this 11 times in 4 days. Why have we slowed? He demanded. Contact ahead, Thesson said without turning. Unregistered, no signal. Vorek looked at the display. A derelict, go around it, we are already behind schedule. It is not a derelict, Ambassador. How do you know? Thesson pointed at the heat signature at the bottom of the screen. Faint, but steady. Whatever was sitting in the dark ahead of them was running a reactor, something aboard it was very much alive. Vorek frowned and said nothing. The fleet slowed further as Deneth pushed more power to the long-range array. The shape resolved in fragments, like a picture being developed in real time. First the bow, angular, reinforced, layered in plating so thick the scanner had to correct its depth estimate twice. Then the midsection, where weapons arrays began to appear, row after row, sitting cold and unactivated. Then the full length of the thing, which caused Deneth to set down his stylus because he needed both hands to be sure of what he was typing. 4.1 kilometers. He checked it again. 4.1 kilometers, sitting completely still in the center of the corridor, running no lights, broadcasting nothing, pointed at nothing in particular. It was not hiding. It was simply there the way a mountain is. Simply there, not threatening anything because it does not need to. The comms board chirped. Deneth looked at it. An incoming signal, audio only, clean, no distortion. Whoever was calling had very good equipment. He patched it through without thinking, which was probably against protocol. But the signal was already playing before he could stop it. The voice was human, female, completely calm. Council fleet, this is INS Dominion's Reach, registered to the human Independent Naval Command. You are currently entering a monitored transit corridor under human observation. Please state your destination and reduce approach speed to 2/3. We will not ask twice. The bridge went quiet. Not the normal quiet of professional people doing their jobs, the specific quiet of people who have just heard something that does not fit inside their understanding of how the world works and are taking a moment to update. Vorek's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Human, he said. He said it the way someone says a word in a language they do not speak correctly, but without comprehension. Thesson had already moved to his own console. He was pulling files, council records on human naval assets, which he had never had reason to look at before. Today, what came back was thin, trade vessels, patrol cutters, a handful of light escorts registered to human merchant guilds, nothing that came within 3 orders of magnitude of what was sitting in front of them. "Deneth," Thesson said quietly, "get me everything our array can pull on. That vessel, resolution, armament profile, power output, everything. Already running, sir." The data came back slowly, because there was a great deal of it. In the corridor ahead, the INS Dominion's reach sat without moving. It had not raised shields, it had not powered weapons. It had sent one message at normal broadcast strength, in a tone that suggested it made this same call fairly often and found the whole thing mildly routine. Aboard the Council flagship, no one spoke for a long moment. Then Vorak straightened his robes, lifted his chin, and told the comms officer to prepare a response. His voice had recovered its authority, smooth and practiced, and full of the weight of 1,000 years of council precedent. But Thesson noticed that the ambassador did not tell the comms officer what to say. He just told him to prepare. Because Vorak, whatever else he was not a stupid man. And even he could see that whatever script he had planned for this journey was no longer the one he was living in. The junior analyst's name was Pavo, and he had made a mistake. At least, that was what he told himself the first time he got the number. So he deleted the calculation and ran it again from the beginning, using a different formula, checking each variable twice. The number came back the same. He ran it a third time, same number. He sat back in his chair, in the small analysis room behind the flagship's main bridge, and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he picked up his report pad and walked to Commander Thesson's station, and he stood there until Thesson noticed him. "Sir," Pavo said, "the dimensional analysis on the contact is complete. And I would like to report it quietly, if that is acceptable." Thesson looked at him. Pavo was not a dramatic person. In 8 months aboard the flagship, Thesson had never seen him be anything other than methodical and unremarkable. The fact that he wanted to be quiet about something was in itself a kind of alarm. Thesson leaned in. Pavo showed him the pad. Length 4.1 kilometers confirmed. Beam 890 meters at widest point. Weapons emplacements. Preliminary count of 340 individual arrays. Classification uncertain on approximately 60% of them. Armor depth. Outer layer estimated at 18 to 22 meters of composite plating. Power output. Running at what appeared to be approximately 12% of estimated maximum capacity. Thesson read that last line twice. 12%. The ship was sitting in their corridor at 12% power, and still registering on their sensors as the largest artificial object any of them had ever encountered in open space. "What does it look like at full power?" Thesson asked. Pavo pointed at the bottom of the report. "I did not model that, sir. I did not think it would be useful information." It took Thesson a moment to understand what Pavo meant. Then he understood. Some information is not useful because knowing it does not change your options. It only changes how afraid you are. He handed the pad back. "Good work, keep this internal for now." In the corridor ahead, the Dominion's reach had not moved. It had sent no follow-up message. It was simply present the way weather is present, not aggressive, not passive, just a condition of the environment that had to be accounted for. Aboard the human ship, Lieutenant Rowe was eating a meal that had gone cold 20 minutes ago and watching the Council fleet on the tactical display. They had stopped at approximately 800 kilometers out, which he thought showed good instincts, not too close, not far enough to look like retreat. They were thinking. He appreciated that. Captain Osa had not left her chair in 2 hours. She was reading, of all things, a maintenance report on the port's secondary coolant array. Ro had learned in his 3 years under her command that she read administrative documents when she was thinking hard about something else. It was her version of packing. A message arrived from Admiral Pell. Text only 6 words. Hold position. Do not escalate. Let them look. Osai read it, marked it acknowledged, and went back to the maintenance report. Ro looked at the Council fleet signature. They were running active scans now, which the Dominion's Reach's systems logged automatically and reported with complete calm. They were being studied. The ship did not mind. It had been studied before. It had a way of being studied that tended to make the people doing the studying very thoughtful very quickly. He checked the weapons board out of habit. Dark across the board, shields were at passive only, enough to catch stray debris. Nothing pointed at anyone. He thought about the Council fleet over their 7 ships, well crewed, probably armed well enough to be dangerous to most things they would expect to meet in a transit corridor, running their scans, seeing what he saw every day when he walked these decks, trying to make the numbers make sense. He had seen the look on new crew members' faces the first time they walked the full length of the ship, all 4+ kilometers of it, and understood for the first time that this was not a large ship with weapons. It was a weapons platform, so large that people lived inside it. There was a difference. It took a minute to feel, but once you felt it, it never went away. Back on the Council flagship, Counselor Maris had said almost nothing since the contact appeared. She was seated in the observer's alcove at the rear of the bridge, which was technically her assigned position but which the active crew had mostly forgotten about. She had a private link to the Council open. She was composing a message. She deleted the first 3 drafts. They were too long. They tried to explain context and history and nuance. By the 4th draft she had reduced it to the thing that actually mattered, the thing that no amount of context would change. She sent it 3 words. Then she folded her hands in her lap and watched the view screen, where the shape of the Dominion's Reach filled the display from edge to edge, sitting completely still, weapons dark, waiting for the Council to decide what it wanted to do next. It had, she noted, the patience of something that did not need to hurry. She found that the most unsettling detail of all. The file had been sitting in the Council's military archive for 6 years. It was not hidden. It was not classified beyond the standard tier. It had been flagged on arrival, assigned a reference number, and placed in the queue for review. Somewhere in the following 6 years, the review had simply never happened. There were always more urgent things. Humanity was a minor species. Their navy was a footnote. Intelligence officer Saren found the file in 40 seconds once she knew to look for it. She opened it. She read the first page. She did not read faster. After that she read slower, because she was going back over sentences to make sure she was understanding them correctly. The file described a class of vessel the Human Independent Naval Command had designated as Titan-class strategic assets, designed for sustained engagement against fortified positions and enemy fleet concentrations, capable of operating independently for up to 8 months without resupply, armor rated to survive, direct strikes from weapons that would split smaller warships in half, primary armament capable of continuous fire for 72 hours before requiring cooldown, secondary armament sufficient to engage and destroy multiple targets simultaneously across a range that Saren had to convert twice before she believed it. The file also noted that the class had been in production for 11 years. The INS Dominion's Reach was hull number 7. Saren printed the key summary page. walked to Commander Thesson and placed it face down on his console. She did not say anything, she just tapped it once. Thesson picked it up, he read it, he set it down, he looked at the view screen. He asked her to please leave the summary with him and return to her post. He picked up the direct military channel request form, the formal process for opening ship-to-ship communications between armed vessels of different powers, and he filled it out correctly, completely, with the proper codes and authentication seals, because he was that kind of officer. Then he walked it to Vorak. "I need to speak to the human captain," he said. "Directly, military channel." "Absolutely not," Vorak said. "Ambassador, please read this." He held out Saren's summary. Vorak read it. The color of his face changed in a way that Thesson noted clinically and said nothing about. "Request the channel," Vorak said. The call connected in less than 30 seconds, which meant the human ship had been expecting it. The voice was the same one from the earlier broadcast. "Osai," she answered, without a title and without ceremony. "Commander, go ahead." Thesson appreciated that. "No performance. Captain, I want to confirm for the record that your vessel is fully armed and operationally active." "It is." "And your current orders?" "Observation and corridor monitoring. We respond to provocation. We don't initiate it." Thesson looked at the summary page. He picked his next question carefully. "In the event of a provocation from a fleet of our approximate size and armament, what does a response from your vessel look like?" There was a pause, 1 second, maybe a little more. "It looks like something you would not need to prepare for," Osai said, "because it would be over before preparation was useful." The line was not a threat. It was delivered the way someone states a technical fact, a load capacity, a melting point. Thesson had interrogated enough military records to recognize that tone. It was the tone of someone describing a thing they have tested. "Thank you, Captain," he said. "I have no further questions." "Understood, we'll be here." The channel closed. Thesson sat down. His chair was a few steps away, and he found it without looking. Around him, the bridge crew was watching him. They had heard the call. They were waiting to see what came next. In their experience, when the commander sat down, without being told to, something important had shifted. "Stand down from active weapons," Thesson said. "All stations to monitoring. Posture, we are not engaging anything today." An ensign near the weapons console, young, still operating on academy instincts, started to ask why. The officer next to her put a hand on his arm and shook her head. He closed his mouth. Thesson was looking at the view screen again. The Dominion's reach filled it. Dark and enormous and absolutely still. He found himself thinking about a trip he had taken as a young officer to the Council's War Memorial on the third moon of Verath Station. There was a wall there with the names of every vessel lost in the succession conflicts 2 centuries ago. Hundreds of names, thousands of crew, all of it, all that loss, compressed into a wall of letters that you could walk past in an afternoon. He thought about what a wall for the Dominion's Reach's opponents might look like. He thought it would be a short wall. Then he thought, no, there would not be a wall. That was the point. There would not be enough left of the other side to put up any kind of memorial at all. He pulled out a message pad and wrote 3 lines to the council, marked urgent, and sent it through Maris's encrypted channel because he trusted it more than the diplomatic line. The message said, "We need to change our approach to the human question." It said, not because they are threatening us. It said, because they are not, and that tells us more than the ship does. The Galactic Council's emergency session had a quorum of 19 species. When the data burst from Maris and Thesson arrived, the session moderator, a veteran of 40 years of council proceedings, a being who had seen border crises, succession disputes, and 2 near wars resolved across his table. Read the summary on his personal screen, and then called for silence. Silence was already there. He had not needed to call for it. The chamber sat quiet for 11 seconds. The moderator counted them later. Looking at the session log, 11 seconds of nothing, no shuffling, no side-channel murmurs, no one coughing or adjusting or whispering to their aid. The kind of quiet that happens when 19 species all have the same thought at the same time, and none of them are ready to say it out loud. A senior military advisor named Gavrin broke it. He did not break it with words. He broke it by pulling up the Council's complete registry of monitored space assets and beginning to cross-reference it against the corridor maps. In Maris's report, he worked quietly and quickly, and the people near enough to see his screen watched the color drain from his face in real time. "How long?" the moderator asked. Gavrin kept working. A minute passed. "Gavrin." "I am making sure," Gavrin said. He did not say it defensively. He said it the way someone says it when they are hopping. The answer changes if they check more carefully. It did not change. He turned his screen to face the chamber. 11 years, minimum, there are transit corridors here. And here, he pointed to 3 sections of the shared map display that appear in no council registry but show consistent energy signatures consistent with regular, high-mass vessel traffic going back at least 11 years. Some of the older signatures suggest the corridors were already established before that. Silence again. "The Dominion's reach," said a delegate from one of the outer systems, a small and usually quiet member species called the Veth, "is hull number 7. Nobody had said that out loud yet. Hearing it in the chamber was different from reading it on a screen. 7, the delegate repeated. The moderator picked up the water glass in front of him. He put it down without drinking from it. One of the council's senior archivists, a position so administrative it was rarely heard from an open session, requested the floor. The moderator gave it to her mostly out of surprise. "There are 3 formal petitions in the archive," she said, reading from her screen, "submitted by the Human Colonial Authority in standard council format. The first requests expanded transit access through the Cathara and Brennan corridors, denied. The second requests observer status upgrade for human vessels in monitored space, denied and tabled. The third requests formal recognition of human-established transit lanes as shared infrastructure. Denied without vote." She looked up. "The third petition is 6 years old." The moderator said, "What did they do after the third denial?" The archivist looked at Gavrin's map on the display, then back at the moderator. "Apparently," she said, "they stopped asking." In the corridor far away, the council diplomatic fleet was moving again. Slowly at reduced speed, shields still high, they were crossing the rest of the Cathara corridor, completing the transit they had come to make, while the Dominion's reach tracked them from 800 kilometers out with the calm attention of a toll officer watching traffic pass through a gate. Aboard the flagship, Vorik had retreated to his private cabin. He had not been seen on the bridge in 2 hours. Maris had taken his seat in the observer alcove without comment. She was writing again, not a brief message this time, a full report. She wrote about the moment the ship first appeared on their sensors. She wrote about the way Thesson's shoulders had changed shape when he read the technical summary. She wrote about the weapons that had never powered up, the shields that had never raised, the voice on the comm line that had described the destruction of their entire fleet, the way an engineer describes a load limit. She wrote, "The most important fact in this report is not the ship's length or its armament or the 11 years of construction we did not notice. The most Important fact is that when we crossed into their corridor, they called us. They did not power weapons. They did not move to intercept. They called us, gave us instructions, and waited to see what we would do. She wrote, a species that builds that ship, and then chooses to use words first, is not a species we understand, and we have been acting for 20 years as if we do. She sent the report. Then she did something that was, for a council observer of her rank, highly unusual. She asked to be connected to the human vessel on an open channel, not a diplomatic channel, not a military channel, just an open line. She identified herself by name and title and asked if Captain Os had a moment. There was a pause of about 10 seconds. Then the captain's voice came through. "Counselor, I have a moment." Maris said, "I want to ask you something, not for the record. I want to ask why you called us first. When we entered the corridor, you could have simply watched us pass." A longer pause. "Because watching isn't always enough," Osai said. "Sometimes people need to know they've been seen." Maris thought about that for a long time after the line closed. There was a tradition aboard the Dominion's Reach. It had not been ordered by Naval Command. It had not been written into any regulation. It had started, as far as anyone could trace it, with the ship's second crew rotation 4 years ago, when a young damage control specialist named Ren decided that the crew should walk the full length of the ship at least once before their first active deployment. Not a drill, not an inspection, just a walk, all 4 kilometers of it. The idea spread because it worked. There was something that happened to a person when they walked from the bow to the stern of the Dominion's Reach, past the main gun decks, past the reactor cores, past the secondary magazines where warheads were stacked in organized rows like the world's most dangerous library, past the medical bays and the repair workshops, and the long corridors that smelled like coolant and machine oil. Something settled in them. Something clicked into place. They understood in their bones what they were part of. Osa had done the walk 112 times. She did not count them for any particular reason. She simply remembered each one. She was doing it now, while the Council fleet continued its slow crossing 2 hours off the port side. She moved without hurry, hands behind her back, nodding to crew members who passed her. They were calm, focused. The situation outside the hull had not changed the temperature inside it by a single degree. She passed through the weapons bay on Deck 7, which housed the lateral rail. Battery 12 individual accelerator tubes, each the length of a city block, each capable of putting a projectile through the armor of a Council heavy cruiser. As if it were made of paper, the bay was clean, cold, dark. No one had touched the activation panel in 4 months, since the last scheduled readiness test. She paused at the bay observation window for a moment, looking at the tubes. Then she moved on. LT Rowe found her near the aft engineering junction and fell into step beside her. "Council fleet updated their power signature," he said. "They raised shields to full about an hour ago. They're still running them." "I know. They're scared." "Yes." Rowe was quiet for a few steps. "Does that bother you?" Osai considered the question. It was a real question from someone who genuinely wanted to know, which was one of the things she valued about Rowe. He did not ask questions to fill space. "It bothers me that it was this easy to scare them," she said. "We didn't do anything. We parked. We answered a hail. We were polite. We're also 4 kilometers long and carrying enough ordnance to ruin someone's entire decade." "Yes, but we didn't point any of it at them." Rowe thought about this. Maybe that's the part that scares them most. She did not answer because she suspected he was right, and she had been sitting with that thought since Maris's call an hour ago, Because watching isn't always enough. Sometimes people need to know they've been seen. She had said that without thinking. It was the kind of thing that came out of her when she was being honest rather than official. She meant it. She had meant it since the beginning of her career, when she had been a junior navigator on a small patrol cutter, and her captain had told her something she had never forgotten. The captain had said, "The purpose of a weapon is not always to fire. Sometimes the purpose of a weapon is to communicate something that words cannot." She had thought about that for 20 years. She thought she understood it better. Every year, the message the Dominion's reach was sending by existing, by parking in the corridor, by calling the Council fleet politely and waiting, dark and patient and enormous, was not a message of aggression. It was a message of presence. It said, "We are here, we have been here, we built this, and we chose to call you before we did anything else." That was the thing Thesson had understood, she suspected. That was what he put in his message to the Council. She reached the aft observation deck and stopped. Through the wide port she could see open space, stars, the distant cluster of light that was the Council fleet. Still moving, still scared, still going where it had planned to go. Her ship had not altered their course by 1 degree. A message arrived from Admiral Pell. Again, text only. Formal dialogue request incoming from Ambassador Vorak. Screening now. Expect forward to you within the hour. You handled this well. Osai read it twice. She was not accustomed to praise from Pell in 3 years. She had received exactly 2 prior compliments from the Admiral, both delivered in the same minimalist format. She collected them the way some people collected small stones from places they had been, something to hold. She walked back toward the bridge. Around her the ship breathed in its quiet, mechanical way, the hum of reactors, the cycling of atmospheric systems, the distant percussion of maintenance crews working somewhere deep in the hull. 4,000 people living inside an idea. The idea that some things are protected. Some lanes are kept open. Some voices get heard. Sometimes you park 4 kilometers of warship in a corridor and wait. And sometimes that is enough. Gavrin had a habit that his colleagues found strange. He kept a second log, not an official one. The Council's session records were automatically archived and maintained by a team of 40 specialists. This was a personal log, written by hand on actual paper in the cramped shorthand he had developed over a career spent watching large events happen to small rooms full of unprepared people. He had started it because he believed that official records captured what happened but not what it felt like to be in the room, and feeling he had come to believe was where history lived. He wrote in it the night after the emergency session. He wrote 19 representatives of the most powerful governing body in known space sat in silence for 11 seconds today because a junior archivist told them that humanity stopped asking for permission 6 years ago. We sat in silence, and then we began the slow and uncomfortable process of updating our understanding of where we stand. He wrote the ship did not fire a single shot. It did not raise a shield. It made a phone call, and we called an emergency session. He wrote, I have been in this chamber for 31 years. I have never seen it as quiet as it was today. He closed the log. He went asleep. 3 weeks later, the formal recognition session was held. It was scheduled for 2 hours. It ran for 6, not because of conflict there was surprisingly little, but because once the door was opened, there were 20 years of accumulated questions that needed to move through it. Maris presented her field report in person, which was unusual for an observer. The Council had requested it. She delivered it without flourish. She had never been someone who used more words than the situation required. When she finished, a delegate from the Shen Collective, a species that had up to this point, been among the most vocal opponents of expanding human recognition, asked her a question that was not in any prepared document. "Did you feel that the human captain was threatening you?" the delegate asked. Maris thought about this for a moment. "No," she said, "that was the problem." The delegate blinked several of his secondary eyes. "I do not understand." If she had been threatening, we would have had a framework for the situation. We know how to respond to threats. What she was doing was something different. She was being patient with us. She was waiting for us to catch up, and that is a great deal harder to respond to than a threat, because it assumes that eventually we will. The chamber was quiet for a moment. Then the vote was called. It passed not unanimously, but it passed. Commander Thesson submitted his personal report 2 days after returning to Council space. It went into the official record with a notation that it was supplementary, non-binding, and provided for context. In practice, it was read more widely than the official report. The section people kept quoting was the last paragraph. He had written, "I want to note one detail that does not appear in the censor records throughout the entire encounter. The INS Dominion's Reach did not raise its shields. Our fleet's shields were active within 4 minutes of contact. We kept them raised for 9 hours. They never raised theirs once. I am not certain what conclusion the Council draws from this. I know what conclusion I draw. A ship that does not raise shields is either reckless or unafraid. Nothing I observed suggested recklessness." He had signed it with his rank, his name, and a note, "For the record." On the day the vote result reached the Dominion's Reach, Osai was in the ship's small commissary eating a meal that was, for once, served hot. Ro brought her the message on a data pad and set it on the table without comment. She picked it up and read it while her food got cold again. "Well," Ro said. She set the pad down. She finished the meal, which was not actually that cold. Yet, then she picked up the pad one more time and forwarded the message to Admiral Pell with a brief note that said, "Received and logged." She added one line of her own, which she marked personal, not official. It said, "They voted yes. Took them long enough." Pell responded 4 hours later. 3 words, "About time, Captain." The Dominion's Reach returned to deep patrol the next morning. The Council's new official registry listed the date, time, and coordinates of the encounter in the Cathara corridor as the formal record of first military contact between the Galactic Council and the Human Independent Naval Command. Crew Officer Deneth, who had been the first to spot the contact on his sensor board, was later asked by a junior colleague how he felt about being the person who had technically started a new chapter in galactic history. He had thought about it for a moment. "It was a Thursday," he said. "I had already spilled my drink. Honestly, the giant human warship was the better part of my morning." Somewhere deep in the Cathara corridor, 2 more human warships ran in silence. Their beacons were dark, their weapons were cold, they were watching corridors that did not appear on any council map, moving through space that no one had told them they were allowed to be in, doing exactly what they had been doing for 11 years without anyone noticing. They were patient in the way that only things with very long plans can afford to be. They were, as always, not threatening anyone. They were simply present. And presence, it turned out, was more than enough.